Welcome back. It is time to set up the June reading journal for this year, 2025. I apologize in advance for some of the funky zoom that you'll see. I'm testing out a new camera setup and I haven't quite got all the bits and bobs figured out. So it starts out very wide and then I try to zoom in later. Anyways, so June was a fairly productive month for my reading. To be fair, I did take a holiday for 2 weeks, so I wasn't constrained by normal working hours, which meant that I could read some longer epic romantic fantasies during the day and it would be totally fine. Anyways, here I'm just setting up the usual background and how many books I've read, that sort of thing, adding some fun floral decorations, and going from there. Starting with the stats, I started with 123 books on my TBR and I ended with 111, and I read 16 books and DNF'd 22, which is a lot. Okay, so the thing about my TBR is that these are books I already own. I got a good portion of them digitally for free through various promotions and author events and whatnot, and not all of them were actually books that I super want to read, and my style has changed, and it's just there are a lot of books that I'm not really interested in anymore, so I'm going through those very slowly. I'm starting them, figuring out, okay, do I like this, do I not like this, and then DNFing or destashing them entirely. Actually, pretty much all of these are digital. My physical books I tend to read through just because I buy them and I know that I'm likely to like them. So that being said, I did acquire 21 books. Now, a good portion of these were in KU, and even a bunch of them were also books that I was given to review for a friend of mine, which I will show you later in this video, I guess. And then I also went to the bookstore, and I did buy a bunch of books at the bookstore. So yes, I did buy a lot of books, but I also DNF'd a lot of books, so that still left my TBR at 111, which I think is quite good. Anyways, just filling out now which books I read, the author, and the rating. I only had one 5-star book this month. A lot of them were 4s, 4.5, that sort of thing, but nothing really stood out until I got to Ice and Ivy by J.D. Evans, which I will show you later. None of them were terrible. You know, I didn't have any 2-star, 1-star reviews. It was all 3, 3.5 up, that sort of a thing. But I also didn't have any except for the one that was super standout. Now, granted, there were a couple 4.5 stars that were so close to being 5 stars, but they just didn't quite make it, and I'll talk about those in a bit. But a bunch of good books and a few very good books, but nothing that stood out except for the Ice and Ivy, which I will talk about in a minute. I always forget how long it takes to fill out the star ratings. I'm actually really slow at coloring things in, so it takes a bit. Maybe I should invest in a stamp. Alright, moving on to the actual review spreads, which, is kind of important. This is where the zoom gets a little bit funky. I apologize. I'm still figuring out this new camera setup. So the first book I read in June is Swift Wings Shadowed Heart by Ingrid Seymour. You cannot see the cover at all. I do apologize. It's very detailed, but it's kind of fun. So this book is sort of a Dragon Rider Academy, romantic fantasy, Fourth Wing-esque type thing. I thought it was very interesting. The main character, whose name totally escapes me right now, she is hiding some magical powers as she wants to go to the Dragon Academy, and there she gets bonded with her dragon Zephyros, Zephyros, I think, and he helps her hide her magic, but then they discover that there's this greater plot and they have to fight the enemy, and it's all very dramatic. There's a bit of romance in there. I will say the romance was more physical chemistry than emotional chemistry, in my opinion, which is why I gave it only 3.75 stars. It was still very entertaining, and I will read the next book when it comes out, but the romance didn't feel romantic much to me. But it had dragons. I can't really argue about dragons. The next book I read was a prequel novella to the Last Gift series by Allegra Pescatore. It's a really fantastic series. If you haven't read it, I absolutely recommend it. Very detailed, very involved. The world is great. The writing is great. And this was a prequel novella featuring the character Paul and how he became duenna, or sort of not quite nanny, but keeper to Eleanor as she was a child. So there's, politics and intrigue. I will say that this novella sort of gave away a few of the rather important plot points later in the series. To be fair, I think it was released after book 2? I want to say book 2. I can't remember. So it might need to be read in that order, I'm not sure. It was still very entertaining, very good, and I absolutely recommend this series to anyone who is interested. The next book I read was the book club book for my Facebook group that I am part of. This is the Order of the Dragon Forged. It's a reader group for books about dragons that I run with a couple of other authors. And the book we read this month was Amethyst Dragon by Eileen Mueller. This is one of her only true romantic fantasies in her Riders of Fire world. This follows Lars and Lydia. They are navigating her father, who doesn't like Lars, and then he becomes a dragon rider, and does he still love her? Can they even find a place together? That sort of thing. I loved the dragon, Singlar. He's great and snarky and so funny, and the romance was very cute and very fun, and I liked the drama. The prose in this moves so quickly. It really is just a lightning quick read, so you don't have to worry about too much of a long story, but it's very involved with other characters from the world, ones that you'll remember from other books in this series. I think it very entertaining, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Next up, we have To Sway a Prince by Jennifer M. Butler. This is part of a series, standalone series, I guess. A bunch of different authors got together and wrote a bunch of books, kind of all in the same world, vein, that sort of a thing. So It is a somewhat cozy romantic fantasy about a woman whose dragon gets kidnapped or stolen or returned home, and she has to go kind of rescue her dragon, but the person keeping her dragon hostage, well, not really hostage, is claiming that the dragon belongs with him, and then there's animosity and a bit of magic, and I think the world was really interesting. I liked the magic and how it was described and how it came into being and that sort of a thing. It was very fun, very cute. Nothing world-shattering, but sometimes you don't need world-shattering books, you just need something that's fun and cute, which is why I gave it 3.75 stars. Of course, again, it had a dragon, and I can't really complain when there are dragons. The next book I read was a featured book for the Summer Reading Challenge for the Indie Fantasy Addicts Facebook group. Every year they do a reading challenge where you read all sorts of indie fantasy in different subgenres by different authors. They have featured reads and games and prizes. It's a whole fun event, and so this was one of the featured reads for June. It is an urban fantasy following Adair Finch. I want to say Finch, but that could be wrong. And he is a warlock with powers of Chronos, which is time, who gets kind of hired by 12-year-old Bree to solve the murder of her mother. I thought it was a very clever book. The characters were really, really interesting. I liked the magic quite a bit. There was enough limitations to it to make it so the characters had to sort of work through the problems on their own without the assistance of magic, but also they're using magic quite heavily. It was very interesting, and I will absolutely be reading the next book in the series. So if you are interested in urban fantasy, it's kind of Dresden Files-esque, but without nearly as much in the way of explosions. That sounds odd for a book, but it was very fun. After that, I read Unbound. This is book 2 in the Songs of Chaos series by Michael R. Miller. There are only 3 books out, I think, so far. I think book 4 is on the way. I don't remember. Anyways, this is the continuation, picking up where book 1 left off, with Ash and Holt on their way to go find the other elder dragons. The Life Elder sent them on a quest to go find the other dragons so that they can join together and defeat the evil dragon and the scourge that is attacking the land once and for all. So I liked this book quite a bit. As always, the characters were really, really well thought. I liked the adventure, and the fact that this book delved more into politics than the previous book I thought was really interesting, with Talia and Pyra. I will say it got more progression fantasy style than is my usual preference, but it was still very entertaining, and I will absolutely be reading the next book. The next book I read was a mystery, a bit of a change, Knave of Diamonds by Laurie R. King. This is the next book in her Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes series. It was entertaining. I will say the first books in this series feel far more intelligent and challenging and a puzzle to me than the later books in the series. I mean, it was fairly obvious and straightforward what was going on, and I didn't feel like there was a lot of mystery there. It was entertaining, and I enjoyed it, and I will keep reading the series as long as there are books, but I like the first books in the series better. The next 2 books are ones that were given to me to review for an upstarting Kickstarter campaign put together by my friend J.H. Foster and her writing partner, whose name escapes me. I will review his books next month when I have copies of those. So they're putting together a collection of historical fiction books about characters in World War II who are opposing the Nazis in the Paris occupation. The books by J.H. Foster feature Hannah Edelstein, who is the mother, and then the books by her writing partner, whose name escapes me, feature Freddie, who is her son, and I'll get to those next month. I thought they were very entertaining. World War II is always a difficult topic, but I think this was done very intelligently, very well researched, and the characters were fascinating. The story was fun. Well, not fun. It was dramatic and intense, but it pulled you along very nicely, and so I liked it quite a lot. I would absolutely recommend. The Kickstarter, I don't know when it will be live, sometime in August, I want to say, but it will have 4 books, for kind of all ages, that sort of a thing, which I think is really cool. The next book is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, which I have had on my TBR for literally a year at this point. So I finally got around to reading it, and it was very well written. I think I liked it quite a bit. It was sort of Russian in style, and I definitely like a Jane Eyre better, but I think this was worth a read, and I may read it again sometime in the future. The next 3 books are the continuation of the Mages of the Wheel series by J.D. Evans. I read book 1, Reign and Ruin, a couple months ago, and I loved it, and so I finally got the next 3 books in the series, and I devoured them. So these are the ones that were my standout books for the month. Book 2 and book 3, which is Storm and Shield and Siren and Scion, they were like 4.5 book star review rating for the month. Not that they were terrible in any way, shape, or form, and I don't have any complaints about them. They just weren't as good as book 1. Book 3, Ice and Ivy, that was absolutely, or book 4, I guess, Ice and Ivy was absolutely as good as book 1, and that's why it's my 5-star review for the month rating. But that is in no way saying that the other 2 were bad. They just weren't as good as book 1, which is a strange thing to say, because they really were really good, and I absolutely recommend the series to everybody. The next book I read was The Little Prince, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the author's name because I get it wrong every time. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry? No, that doesn't sound right. Anyways, it was a fun, poignant story. I really liked it. I read it really fast, and I thought it was sort of intelligent without being condescending. I liked the fact that it was written for kids about grown-ups. I think that was very nice, very cute, and I enjoyed it. The last book that I read for this month was Evergreen Academy by Heather Schneider. It's a cozy fantasy all about magical botanists. Briar is discovering her magical botany powers and goes to attend the Evergreen Academy, and it is very cozy. All the plants and little food and the description of the scenery, very fun. There's enough drama in there to have some high stakes, but not massive amounts. And I absolutely enjoyed it. I will say the ending was a bit abrupt, but there is a book 2 which you can dive right into afterwards, and I'm still waiting for book 3. Alright, so there is one book that I didn't list in my reviews, and that is Legends of Neverwhere by David A. Trotter, and I did not list this in my reviews because it is a book that I edited, and I do not review books that I edit. That it would be wildly unethical of me. I did read it though, so it's on my list of books read. Anyways, now I'm just going to go fill in my book bingo. I don't have a lot here. I think I had pink cover and a translated book and a classic. So there's not a huge amount. There's still quite a bit that I need to fill in, but I had some, which is pretty good. Then filling in my book bracket, which I probably, it's kind of hard to decide. The options were Deadly Education or Ice and Ivy, and Deadly Education, I think, probably won out just a little bit because I really love that book, but Ice and Ivy was so good too. But it's the 4th book in a series, so I don't think it really can count as winning. I don't know. Anyways, then going in and filling in the number of books read. As you can see, I am a little bit behind on my 200 books goal for the year, but I don't really care. It's more of just a guideline. Now I'm just filling in how many books I read. There were 16 books by 12 authors. 6 of them were physical books, and 10 of them were ebooks, which is a pretty average breakdown for me. So that was June. 16 books. I'd say pretty good mix of genres, primary fantasy, surprise surprise, with mystery and historical fiction and whatnot thrown in. So what did you read for the month of June? And did you enjoy them at all? Let me know.